continuing in our program, and the last debate of today's program is ahead of us. So please stay here in the main hall of the Chernin Palace as we are ready to start. We will just prepare the setup, and in few seconds we will launch the last discussion of today's program. Thank you very much for your patience. I think we can start. So I would like to kindly ask you to take your seats here in the auditorium so we can start with the last debate of our today's program. Thank you. And now it's time to start with the last debate. This time we will focus again on Ukraine, as has been said already by the moderator of the previous panel discussion. So the main topic of this European chat is rebuilding a country in war using best practices for Ukraine's recovery. And as I said, it's the last discussion of today's program, and it's my pleasure to welcome here the speakers, the esteemed speakers of this panel debate. So if they are ready, I think we can start. So I would like to welcome here Alina Boiko from the Reform Support Team of Mine Economy of Ukraine. You can take your seat. I would also like to welcome here Jan Marian, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Good afternoon. I would also like to introduce you Lesia Ogryzko, Board Member of RISE Ukraine, Visiting Fellow of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Good afternoon. And Jana Toužimská, Acting Regional Director for Eastern Partnership and Balkans Relief and Development Department from People in Need. Good afternoon. And now I would like to pass the floor to the moderator of this panel discussion, Rikard Jozwiak, Radio Free Europe. The floor is yours.
They're all okay. That's a great echo here. Fantastic for a radio journalist. Guys, thanks for staying so long here. I know it's late in the day. We have about 1 hour and then a reception is waiting for you. So let's make this quick and easy by a short introduction, and we jump right into our eminent experts that are really, I would say, the best in the field on this. So what we're talking about here is the reconstruction of Ukraine, but how to do that in the middle of a burning war. And what I want the panelists to share with you is best practices. How do you actually do that? Does the aid goes to the right region, to the right people? who are the players here? Is it, we're just talking government, are we NGOs, what about private sector, etc.? So I really hope that we can touch on a little bit on how to talk about something that might seem a bit superfluous right now, because, you know, reconstruction is something that happens after something, but it needs to go in parallel. I think we all agree on that. So before I start though, it's a housekeeping thing. You know that you cannot ask questions directly like that. There's no microphone going around. So on your desks, there is this QR code called Slido. There you type in the questions. I'll have them here and I will ask them for you. So starting with Alina, someone who is probably one of the authorities on this issue right now, tell us, how is this working? What is the best practice? What is working, what is not?
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to start probably with the context. What does it mean, recovery, actually? So it's not only about infrastructure, it's also about the people. So recovery, it's a very complex topic, and it's about balance of the priorities. So when it's the full-scale invasion started, we didn't know how, where, what, and so from where to start. But now 3 years already passed, and what I would say that recovery focus now is based on the Ukraine plan. And this is my first point. So this is the most important, to have the strategy, who, when, what should done. And it's extremely hard to find the balances and to find what should be the priority according to the limitation of all resources. So currently we have this Ukraine plan. It was approved this March and supported by the European side. So currently our recovery based on 69 reforms plus 16 investment indicators, which have to be achieved during the next 4 years. So short period and the huge tasks. But it's so important that we already have this Ukraine plan. Because now our, let's say, government, right, so society and business know where we are going, what is the priority. And of course, not only like we know it in the country, our partners also know what is our priority, what do we need, where we are going actually. Of course, this plan is not, and all of these, let's say, indicators are not fixed because the situation is changed, of course. But at least we have this plan and we know where to go now. And two more points, what is really important. It's not only to have this plan, and it's not only responsibility of our public authority, let's say. It's important to have a strong civil society and to have the initiatives from the civil society. So I would like to also say that we have a great solution how to make our recovery more transparent, more efficient, more accountable. We have a dream. It's digital reconstruction platform, which actually focused on transparency and efficiency. And you can go wherever you are, all over the world. You can go to this platform, to this digital platform, and to see, monitor how our projects are implementing, in which stage they are. So it's really important that everyone can follow the reconstruction process. And this is like, how to say it, this is, let's say, the biggest ecosystem, public ecosystem, which provides a single pipeline for all projects which are implemented in Ukraine now. And what is also important to mention, one more civil society initiatives, it's a big recovery portal. It's also important because it provides transparency for the society and for business regarding the investment projects which are implemented in Ukraine. So what I would like to say, to sum up, a little bit. So it's important. Recovery should based on joint work of the state, of the business and civil society. So our government should follow the leadership. Our society should be involved and strong and resilient, but support all of the initiatives, and business should stay and work. Actually, this is our task inside what we should do.
Alina, I want to push you a little bit because I am still a journalist. There is a plan, great.
Yeah.
There is transparency, even better. But now comes the action. Can you already point, I realize this is early, this war, but are there already some real success stories, something that has worked really well in terms of actually recovery, that already is working?
Let's see how do we estimate the previous years? So Ukraine, it was a surprise for many that Ukraine is still economically resilient, actually. So last year we had economic growth like over 5%. This means that we do act, actually, and it works. So according to this economic performance, let's say, so we do have, I would say this is a successful story, because the attacks and all of these, missiles every day comes to Ukraine. So we still work, we're still resilient, we still, continue to function. So I would say this is this is what could be.
That's a real success.
Yes.
That's a real success,
yes.
Absolutely. Jan, turning to you, in a country full of Ukrainian friends, you're probably one of the biggest ones. So looking from the outside, and Czech Republic has been impressive in so many ways when it comes to helping Ukraine, ammunition initiative, sanctions, pushing for accession talks to start. But looking at the reconstruction efforts, where the Czechs are also really, really good on this. Tell us a bit more how Prague is working hand in hand with Kiev and others.
Thank you. I'm afraid I will have to start from a different angle first, because I am
absolutely
mostly dealing with political issues related to support to Ukraine, and also the Ukrainian peace formula, for instance. But I need, and there are other experts in the panel who know more about the details. I think first we see our red lines as allies of Ukraine moving, and I think maybe a year ago we discussed a lot how to do smart reconstruction, build back better. Now we see that the situation is sometimes more urgent, and maybe there were those who believed, some member states and others, we can help with the reconstruction and that's it. Now, because of Russian behavior, I think many understand that we also need to help with the ammunition, air defense, and comprehensive military support. Otherwise, those efforts would be futile. So I think this is a big shift. We also see attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, which has impact on the whole energy sector. We understand that probably this winter will be the worst winter so far, and we have shifted our lines, as I said, on using the weapons, on delivering the weapons. Now you see these maps of Russia, labeled as this is all near Kharkiv, so this can be done. So that's my first point. Maybe sometimes now we have to be more pragmatic and really understand that we have to create conditions on the ground, helping Ukraine militarily, both for the future, maybe peace efforts, and also for the reconstruction. At the same time, we are among those, and maybe we are leaders, who really work as close to the front as possible, including energy generation, support to schools, hospitals, clean water. That's my first point. Second, the role of the EU, not only as provider of humanitarian assistance and development assistance and joint project, but also the reforms linked to the future EU membership of Ukraine, which will help with the business climate institutions, and this will be also good for Western support, investment, Czech and other companies operating in Ukraine. And third, I'd like to subscribe to what you said about the civil society. I think for Czechia, civil society has been always one of the key partners, not only in Ukraine. So we believe in vital role of civil society, first as partners in projects, but also as a watchdog to what local authorities and others are doing. Thanks.
You mentioned energy infrastructure, which I think might be the key going into the later half of 2024. I mean, because it seems like Russia is really targeting those heavily right now. In which specific way can EU, Czechia, NATO help Ukraine with this? Because it's clear that this must be a priority for the winter.
Well, there are some neighbors of Ukraine, including Slovakia, maybe Hungary, I'm not sure, delivering already now electricity to Ukraine. There are many helping with the reconstruction of the grids, providing generation units or other necessary equipment. And then many NATO allies and many EU member states are providing military support and all the kind of support including the air defense. There is a new initiative for air defense led by Germany, and of course the Czech ammunition initiative. So this is, I think, all part of the same process, trying to help Ukraine and also create good conditions on the ground. Our goal is Ukraine free of Russian aggression, and Russia is the one who can end it anytime, even now. And we fully support territorial integrity of Ukraine. And of course, we fully support the peace process so that we help Ukraine gather global support for the peace formula.
Thank you, Jan. Lesia, it's a rather dire picture so far, in a sense. You know, I mean, it's a difficult year, and it might get more difficult. But I just wonder if you can also highlight a bit best practices. What to focus on right now from the NGO sector, from civil society sector, government, etc.
I have a short answer and a slightly longer one.
Go for both, please.
The short answer is what I usually use as a slogan, a model, that the best reconstruction tomorrow is weapons for Ukraine today. And using this opportunity, I really wanted to thank the people of Czechia and the government, which has been really tremendously supportive of Ukraine, starting with the ammunition initiative, with the sanctions, with the peace talks. We really feel that we have your back, and this is really so much appreciated by Ukrainians, the population, civil society, and our authorities. You know, I've just came back just a couple of hours ago. I've arrived from Berlin, where I participated in the Ukraine Recovery Conference, which is, for those of you who don't know, sort of the most important annual conference this year, with more than 60 countries represented, when people are discussing reconstruction, restoration efforts in Ukraine and around Ukraine. And the conference was absolutely fantastic this year, with super inclusion of civil society, business, and local authorities. But for me, as a ordinary Ukrainian, and I know that I speak not just on my own behalf, it becomes increasingly inadequate against the backdrop of almost daily attacks and assaults on Kharkiv, almost daily missile attacks on Sumy, on Odessa, and I can go on with 1,000 smaller or bigger cities and towns and villages of Ukraine. So it becomes increasingly inadequate to keep discussing fancy formulations such as the Build Back Better principle, or, you know, the sustainable urban reconstruction and planning of Ukraine, and green innovative solutions while rebuilding Ukraine. I'm not trying to diminish all of this. This is extremely important. But I think we collectively, but most importantly ourselves, Ukrainians, we did a bad job in delivering this message of super urgency of supporting Ukraine militarily, and doing this correlation basically between the war and the reconstruction. And there is a very direct line between those two. And if we want to use less resources in order to reconstruct and rebuild Ukraine, we have to mobilize all possible, especially military and defense resources now, for us not to rebuild Ukraine later. Now, on the question of best practices, I think in the conditions of a war of attrition, Ukrainians have only one chance to really keep on being resilient and win this war. And this is both in the military, but also in the economic stance. And that is, we have to continue being resilient and agile enough, and to apply mechanisms which are sort of an asymmetric response to Russia. I will give just two examples, one in education and the other in energy. There are currently 900,000, so almost 1 million school kids who don't have access to offline education. You have almost another 1 million school kids that have only partially access, so they're sort of going to school in a hybrid format, so mostly online, and sometimes they have the opportunity to also visit the school. This situation for these children, which is altogether almost 2 million school kids, which is roughly 50% of Ukrainian school kids, don't have access already for 4 years. This is the first 2 years of COVID, and then the second 2 years is the full-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine. We will be facing a situation September this year where fifth graders will not, we will be having fifth graders who've never seen their classmates. They've never experienced what it is to socialize in schools and having a normal school life. And when I'm thinking about, these agile approaches or asymmetric and smart reconstruction, I mean that we don't necessarily need to reconstruct something that has been there in Ukraine. For example, one particular hromada, which is territorial amalgamated community, had 5 schools. Many of them have been destroyed, for example. We don't need to rebuild all of them. Sometimes we just need to provide access, and this access can be underground facilities, for example, especially when we're talking about communities that are on the front line. Or sometimes it just makes sense to build good roads and to buy a couple of school buses, and then have just one school that will be sort of the key school in this hromada and for a couple of other hromadas. So we have to think more creatively and not think of, there were 4 kindergartens, we have to rebuild all of them. The other example is energy. I think everybody understands the really dire situation around the energy situation in Ukraine, and it's not just the second half of next year. We are already experiencing some cutoffs. I came from Kyiv to Berlin, and we had already 2 weeks of really very difficult situations where you don't have electricity, water whatsoever for almost a day, for example. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't really make sense to rebuild the very old Ukrainian, which is a legacy of the Soviet times, electricity grid. It absolutely makes sense to now invest into the decentralization of the energy system of Ukraine, and, for example, invest rather in the decentralized and interconnectivity and the capacity of the interconnectors between the energy networks, because it's much more costly to destroy smaller energy networks across Ukraine rather than target one big energy grid.
Lesia, you mentioned the Berlin conference, which obviously was a big success there. But it was something that I noticed that was interesting about that, and it was actually the sort of commitment from multinational companies as well, so business. And the question is, how do you think, can business be involved already now in helping in any sort of way? Or is that just something for when the war is ending and you just need especially sort of capital coming into the country?
Well, first and foremost, business was very much included this time in the Ukraine Recovery Conference. That was already last year in London, the focus. I think the German counterparts did a very good job in especially the matchmaking between Ukrainian business representatives, all of the SMEs and other enterprises, and the German as well as international representatives of the business. My colleague Alina just mentioned about the DREAM, which is the digital restoration ecosystem for accountable management. This is how you unpack the word DREAM. And this is a system where all stakeholders, including international partners, twin cities, international financial institutions, and the business sector can really pick pretty much any object that has been either destroyed or damaged in Ukraine and already pledge and participate in its reconstruction. I very much believe that Ukraine's recovery will not be possible just by means of the Ukrainian budget, obviously, by means of just the international community, including the IFIs and support, bilateral support. I even don't think, even if we get all the Russian frozen assets abroad, which is a very important ask of Ukrainians and a very important task for all of us as a civilized Western community, even all of this money, I don't believe this would be enough to recover and reconstruct Ukraine. And that's why I do believe the private sector and businesses all around the globe, and especially the West, are an essential part of Ukraine's reconstruction, and it can already happen and is actually happening already.
Thank you, Lesia. Jana, you are representing probably, I would say, the most impressive Czech NGO, civil society, people in need, doing great job, not only in Ukraine, but pretty much all over the world. Can you explain a bit what it is you're looking at in Ukraine right now, what you're doing there, what you're planning to do, and what you would like to do as well, but might not be possible right now?
I think some time ago we have realized, not only us, but probably also other actors, that we cannot wait for the recovery period and that we have to stop looking at emergency assistance and the recovery as two silos, as two different periods, but have to start dealing with it somehow simultaneously. We have the luxury of having 95% of colleagues of Ukrainian nationality. We have them living in the communities where we assist, where we support. They're at the front lines, they're in the center, and they're also in the west of the Ukraine. And I think for us, it's now looking at really how do we replenish the resilience of the Ukrainian society and within our projects also, or with our projects, so that we can help them keep going. While we, of course, engage in humanitarian assistance and emergency, and we, of course, follow and assist in Kherson and in the areas that are still accessible. But how do we do it at the same time where we also start implementing some of the recovery projects? And it's possible, of course. We were lucky to utilize some of the private funding, but also already institutional funding. We do want to definitely focus on locally led action. This has been a paramount of our, and really a paramount guidance for PIN globally, to listen to the local voices. Yes, we do have some expertise, but of course, as the colleagues said already, there is plenty of expertise already in Ukraine and have been there. And we can really be the facilitator, and as a Czech actor also perhaps to be able to bring some of the transitional experience, as we have also entered the EU, and we have also experienced, of course, some of the hurdles. Now we know the processes, and this is perhaps where, as a Czech organization also, we can be a partner. We see ourselves as a vector to be really working with the local authorities on the recovery, to be able to work with the youth, to not to forget all the vulnerable populations that we focus on, and to make sure that they're not left behind also during the recovery and reconstruction process. globally, not only in Ukraine, we focus on promoting participatory and inclusive governance. And I think this is one of the good practices as well, that our programming is focusing on to really working with local authorities to help them how to really have structured way to absorb perhaps the funding that will come from the EU programming or from the EC that is already coming to some level also to the CSOs. We do have a good experience working with local CSOs and listening to their voices and what do they need. They've been on the ground. Many of them have focused on working with youth previously or culture, and they have turned into humanitarian actors. So now we work with them together to help them strengthen their systems and their capacities, and to do whatever they want. If they want to be growing and really be the actor that will just stay local, or if there will be some local organizations that will grow, just like PIN has over the years in the Czech Republic, where we also were just a local organization, and now we are an international NGO. So this is already happening with some of the NGOs and CSOs in Ukraine, where some of them are really growing, and they do have the systems and structures to be able to absorb some of the larger funding as well, some of the institutional donors funding. And this is also what PIN is advocating for within Ukraine, and I think we're at the forefront to really advocate for access to bigger funding of local CSOs and NGOs to be able to go through some of the due diligence processes. We help them with capacity strengthening, and we also help with advocacy with some of the large donors. Of course, where the rhetoric is, we want localization is important, locally led action, you name it, it's there, it's in all the strategic documents, it's the topic. In practice, however, we see that the practice is slightly different, where a lot of the risk is still on the INGOs. So we do work with the local CSOs. We do build our own funds where we can support the local CSOs without such stringent due diligence, such as, for example, some of the institutional donors may have. Of course, this is understandable, but this is also at forefront of our advocacy to be able to build mutual due diligence recognition, passportization, and to really prepare on one side the CSOs and the NGO structures to be able to go and apply for, let's say, British funding or German funding or even Czech funding, and have the structures and be able to prove that they are not a risk, they're not a liability for the donor. And on the other side, we try to also discuss and advocate with the donors and with the large partners that as PIN, either we can be the sort of vector, we can take some of the risk and we will continue working with the local partners, but also how can they change their due diligence and their requirements so that they can really invite the Ukrainian CSOs to the table.
Jana, sorry, Jan had a little input there that you wanted to put as well, yeah.
If I may make two tiny points related to Czechia. I spoke about military support, ammunition, but also about the EU, and I have to say that book can also be a weapon, so we have translated the EU treaties and commentary by Czech legal experts into Ukrainian, so it's available both like this, but it's also online. And my second point, and I was recently in Berlin, I was surprised to hear that, and I don't know whether this is correct, that German experts from NGOs do not travel to Ukraine to be involved in the projects on the ground. In our case, we have our embassy, our Czech center, cultural center there. We have people from NGOs traveling there basically on the daily basis. So I wonder whether this is true. And sometimes I think thanks to this, we can really have knowledge of the situation on the ground and the real needs.
I cannot say if it's true, but I do know that some of the large actors, it's not only the government, but also some of the large INGOs work through partners on the ground, and they do travel maybe just to Kiev, or they don't travel. I guess it depends, but it's there is a different approach in to how PEN operates directly in the field, and the other some NGOs may have a different approach. Of course, that is a little bit more distant, or there is a intermediary in the process.
Obviously, if I may, Jana, and people in need have been in Ukraine for a long time, so you know the terrain basically. How is your cooperation with maybe some Western NGOs that don't have the same local know-how, if I put it that way?
I think we've been in Ukraine since 2003 with our Human Rights Department programming, and since 2014 in the Donbas region with the humanitarian development projects. And the cooperation is very well, and it's ongoing. Everybody has their different style. Of course, there are people on the ground. Some utilize more Ukrainian colleagues, some less. But I think that the trend is there that, the local colleagues are, of course, well, in general, there are not that many professionals in the humanitarian and development cooperation arena to be found. But I think that it just really depends. And yes, it's true that some of the actors have a different approach and it's more distant, but cooperation in general, also with the Western or Northern INGOs, it's good. I think PEN has a really good name, and also the way we managed to scale up in Ukraine, and we I think did it very well, and we also helped some of the Western NGOs that were not based in Ukraine prior to February 22 with their certification, and we provided some advice and some legal support as well. And I think that our renommee from Ukraine has also been visible in our work also, and the level of professionalism within the region of the Eastern Partnership and Balkans where I work as well.
Thank you very much. I just encourage everyone to send questions via Slido. And I have one more that I want to ask, because you piqued my interest, Jan, but this is a question for any of you. So obviously, hopefully in 2 weeks, Ukraine will officially start accession talks with the EU. How important is the EU accession process in terms of reconstruction of Ukraine as well? Is that something that can go hand in hand, or are they two fairly separated process?
I think I've mentioned this already. There is one point. There will be the formal enlargement process, which, frankly speaking, will be long and difficult on both sides. I mean, opening and closing the chapters, etc. I think in the meantime, and this goes also for Moldova, for instance, we have to do everything possible to get our partners closer to the EU in terms of involvement in the internal market, membership in the EU programs and agencies, some structural or infrastructural projects. So that's something that we need to do now, and in parallel there will be the formal negotiating process, which, as I said, also you will need to have all the member states on board, and this will take some time, so let's be realistic.
Wishing to?
I would say this is an absolute partnership where these two processes should go hand in hand, and they are anyway very interconnected, because essentially what European integration is a very large set of reforms and changes and transformations that Ukraine has to undergo. And basically when we're talking about, let's say, the Ukraine facility, that is the mechanism for supporting Ukraine over the next 5 years, which is very much tied, by the way, to the recovery or to maintaining Ukraine's budgetary stability. We're talking about the very same changes that have to be made in order to modernize Ukraine, to rebuild and restore all of its capacities on the one hand. On the other hand, it's the same for the European integration. It's the key. It's more than 3,000 legislative acts that have to be transposed now into the national legislation. So from the expert community and also from the government side, I know very well that these two processes are being regarded as basically one big push to transform Ukraine and to modernize Ukraine. I would just say it's not only the structural changes in Ukraine, what your integration means for us. So it's not just about, you know, policy making and the work of the government and the parliament, but it serves Ukrainians also as a very important psychological tool in sort of the prospect that we are fighting not just for the existence, for national identity, but we're also fighting for our European future. In a way, this is a continuation of the fight we had on the Maidan 10 years ago, 2013. That was the strive of Ukrainians to be back again in our European family. My husband is serving, and many friends of his who are now in the trenches, basically on the front line, having sometimes no access to internet or to you know the news from outside. There were questions sometimes from them when they've been shelled all the time, and they were texting my friends and my husband asking, so how are we going with the EU accession talks, or how are we going with the candidacy? This is really not just simple words or not just a huge number of you know, legislative acts for Ukraine. This is really an aspiration and something that gives us hope and inspiration to Ukrainians and to those who are fighting for us and for us collectively.
Alina, adesso? Yep.
Thank you.
We have talked a lot about Western help to Ukraine, but of course there are other actors as well. China, Turkey, so who are maybe a bit controversial. So how do you see any pros, cons about allowing these countries as well to come into Ukraine? I'm thinking especially about China, to avoid you know, some sort of future dependency. Jan? Yeah?
I think, if I may, it's on Ukrainian partners to decide on this. I think we see some efforts by Turkey. As to China, it's getting more difficult. I understand, my impression is that originally Ukrainian government was very open as to China, hoping for some support maybe. Now it's clear that China stands behind Russia even more publicly. So I assume the government of Ukraine will adjust the policies.
Anyone? Alina, Lesia? No? What do you?
No, I very much agree. Ukraine was at the beginning still very hopeful vis-a-vis, especially when we're talking about China, and hoping that China would indeed either be neutral or not supporting, at least not supporting Russia. Now with every new month, I would say, of the war, we see how much China is really standing behind and really supporting the war effort of the Russians with providing, with being basically the biggest trading partner, with providing so many different elements, which then are in turn being used by Russia to assemble the missiles and everything else that is then being thrown at our sky, into our skies and on our heads. Also looking at the peace summit, seeing, I'm sure my colleague can add to that, but seeing how much effort is being put by the Chinese to, you know, to counterweight the Ukrainian peace formula, to come up with alternative peace, well, pseudo-peace solutions, the recent one with Brazil, for example. And I don't think that with every such unfriendly acts towards Ukraine, there will be any prospects of having real trade and economic cooperation with China going forward. But having said this, we don't know how long the war will be going. We don't know what future government we will be having once the war is over, because obviously now we're not talking about any sort of elections in Ukraine. But it will be definitely a very tough choice because we might face a situation that once the war is over or we approach a sort of ceasefire, some of our Western allies will push back saying, well, it's safe now, and you go ahead and you know, you deal with your problems on your own. And I think it will be a very tough solution for Ukrainians, seeing at some point that there is no such big support any longer, to also consider alternative ways. I can only speak for myself. I think values go first, and I would definitely not encourage to work with those who have been working against Ukraine over this war.
Jan, you want to jump in?
Sorry to speak too much. First, I think we need to be aware, even if there is a ceasefire, let's remember the Minsk agreement 2014-15. So those who believe that this will be the solution, those would be wrong. Unless the Russian system regime changes, this can happen again, and we've seen this already. And we should have reacted differently back in 2014. And that's the first point. And then.
Anyone else want to jump in on this topic? Jan,
sorry. Now, I think we need to make sure and show that we are ready to continue really the support as long as necessary, be it military support, be it development, reconstruction, political support. I think Russia has always been hoping for election cycles in Europe, in the US and elsewhere, and also for some Ukraine fatigue. So we need to make sure that we are ready to continue, and we are ready to do this, and Russia cannot hope for winning the time and then like getting EU and others tired.
We have two energy questions here that I will lump together. One is, how do you make sure short-term reconstruction investment, how do we make sure that short-term reconstruction investment is resilient, for example, in the energy infrastructure, against the collateral damage of war? And secondly, are there any plans, perhaps with the help of Western partners, to develop energy in safer parts of Western Ukraine, for example, in Lviv? And would this be something you would advise to do? Anyone?
I can perhaps start, and then maybe my colleagues will continue. As for the energy sustainability of Ukraine, as already mentioned, Ukraine's energy system is indeed a heritage of the Soviet times, where the system was and is still old. It's not environmentally friendly. It's very costly in maintenance, but most importantly, it is vulnerable. Something that I spoke about earlier, it's really easy to target the key energy objects of Ukraine, and then you end up having huge cities being just deprived of any electricity. We're talking about millions of people here. And that's why I think the only way for us, and in this sense, it is sort of a chance. I don't like talking about wars as an opportunity, but in this sense, and in the energy sector for Ukraine, it is an opportunity to build a very decentralized energy system in Ukraine with microgrids, with clean energy installations, and most importantly, with a very decentralized interconnection capacity in Ukraine. This is what I see, and I see also from Ukraine's business. And you were asking about, the input of international companies. Energy is one of the biggest player or sectors here, which will be very, very interesting for investments from abroad.
Jana.
Not an expert, but we have already been approached also by some other, like for example, US-based company that even last year or even year and a half ago wanted to promote renewable energy units within Ukraine. So I think it's already happening. Our partner, Eco Action, is already implementing some of these decentralized systems. And I think, again, this is the Czech Republic's experience, and maybe Jan can speak more on that. is that what is happening now here with the Green for Saving or Zelená úsporám and the program that we have and this kind of one-stop shop, and there's this there are different programs already, like the donor programs that can be utilized now. I think that bilateral assistance, probably government to government, will be key. Again, not an expert, but it's already happening, and I think that we'll see this winter, but I think this would have to be somehow very rapidly scaled up so that the next winter is different.
I can perhaps just add one more sentence. I think I didn't see such a renaissance of the different small installations and so many initiatives across Ukraine when it comes to renewable energy now. This is now the thing in Ukraine because everybody understands the prospects of this autumn, of next winter and going forward. And talking of civil society, which is also one very important actor in it, it's not just business that is heavily investing into Ukraine's renewables, but it is civil society, and I very much agree with my colleague, that is implementing or thinking about implementation of very innovative solutions. And from, I represent the RISE Coalition, which is 50 organizations in Ukraine and abroad that are looking at Ukraine's recovery, and we have a very good standing in looking at the civil society in Ukraine. And I think it is the green activists in Ukraine that are one of the most consolidated in Ukraine. They have so many mechanisms of cooperation. I didn't see that in most of the other actors in sectors of Ukraine's reconstruction. So I'm quite positive that after a couple of years we will be having a very different situation in the energy sector.
We have about 5 minutes left, but I have a feeling that it's quite a good conversation, and I think the cocktails are still cold. So let's go on for another few minutes. There's a question here whether Ukraine or the European Union, for that matter, have any specific plans when it comes to the territories that currently is under occupation. How to deal with them when they one day will return to Ukraine, because they will. Yeah, EU or Ukraine itself. Is there any plans right now from anyone? Maybe Alina, do you?
Let me jump to the discussion. Actually, even before this full-scale invasion, I remember in the Verkhovna Rada there was discussion, and we prepared the legislation. So how we will, how will work, how Ukraine will come back to our territory. So now it's quite again discussable question, but what do we understand? It's our territory. So those who, so Ukrainians, they are those who feel Ukrainian there, so they will stay, and we will, rebuild it as the whole territory. But the question is really, time, and it's very sensitive at the same time question, because it's not about territory, it's about the people. And time is going, and time doesn't work on our side, I would say. So I know that people in that territory, occupied territory, they are waiting for Ukraine, for sure, and we have such evidence, etc. But so now, what do we see? It's a territory, but how it will change, how the situation will change when we can come back there. It's an open question. And I know that we do have discussion, so in our Ministry of this occupied territory, right? Yes. So there is a discussion, there is some programs, there is actions which are, discussing and prepared to be ready for the time, for right time. But time should come, for these actions.
Else willing to jump in?
I very much agree. It's first and foremost about people, not territories, and it will be a very, very difficult process. We in Ukraine have already experienced reintegrating those territories that have been under occupation only 1 year. Those that have been occupied 2022, and we liberated them in 2023. That was just 1 year, and we saw how difficult that was, and how quickly propaganda and brainwashing works. You don't need 10 years for that. Now, when we're talking about territories that are under Russian occupation for 10 years, I really don't know what people think there, but I know how powerful Russia's propaganda is. And I'm quite sure that this dialogue, despite the strategies of the Ministry of Temporarily Occupied Territories, the different action plans that have been in place and are now being revised due to the different landscape now, I think it will be first and foremost horizontal initiatives, people-to-people contacts, cultural initiatives that will be the first hand that we will be giving to the people who are on those territories, because I think when it will be approached from a vertical point of view, the government comes and introduces large-scale programs and education, etc., this might not fly just because people have been existing in a parallel reality, because Russia is indeed a parallel reality, and the media and information landscape is so different from ours.
It's a bit of a controversial question, but quite upvoted here, so I'm prompted to ask it. It's a hot button issue in a sense. Ukrainian draft age males left the country in fear of being mobilized. Do you see them coming back to Ukraine, not as soldiers, but as economic drivers? Controversial question, but is that possible?
You mean if the legislation was to be changed, correct?
Correct. I assume so by the question, yes.
Because Ukraine's legislation currently does not allow, or no, it allows people to, of course, and invites people to return, but under the risk that you might really indeed be, not be forced, but in a way be forced to join the Ukrainian armed forces. It's a very controversial. It's a bit, and we're having these discussions in Ukraine internally quite often. Is it the economy that you have to support? Because in turn, it is the economy and the private sector representatives that then gain revenue, and from that revenue they pay taxes to Ukraine's budget, hence they contribute to the budgetary support, and the budget of Ukraine looks very dire now, with basically all of the social payments that have to be paid is coming from the international partners and international financial mechanisms. And then the vast majority of Ukraine's own budget is going to support the armed forces. So in a way, we're anyway talking about the very same, right? If you support economy, you will have taxes that then will be spent to support Ukraine's armed forces. But the question is, and I don't have an answer, and the vast majority of Ukrainians don't have an answer this too, we don't know how many people we have left in Ukraine's army. And that's why it is a controversial question, and I think only the president and a couple of other people in the general staff would be able to understand, do we have enough people to keep on fighting? Or can we allow ourselves to use men, including men, to economic activities to support Ukraine financially. So I don't have an answer to that.
You see, Alina, you seem prompted to want to jump in as well. Or
There is a tough question. There is no easy answer for that, actually. But probably we should find this answer by being honest, and we should follow the, let's say, transparency in our decisions. So by this I want to say that the reality is really hard. And yes, as Lesia already mentioned, yeah, we do have just a big trouble with the budget. So for this year we need 400 million, like $20 billion. So it's like our deficit of our budget. At the same time, we do need to think about our soldiers who have already like 3 years on this, serve in our army. So we need to change people there. So, and it has to be a honest talk with the society and with the business, because from the other point of view, so let's take the Kyiv metro system. So they have a lack of actually labor. So they don't have who will work in this entity, because all of men are already on the front in the army. So this, this is the question which has to be, which need more transparency and true and honest talk with the society.
Jan, did you want to jump in as well? Or sort of, we probably need to wrap up, but I wanted to ask one round of questions, well, the same question to all of you, starting from left to right this time. I mean, in this room, and me included, I think most of us really support Ukraine and want you to win, and want to help rebuilding Ukraine. What is the one wish or one tip you want us, everyone in here, to do to help Ukraine, apart from donating money to people in need, of course? But what is the one thing we should think of? What is the one thing we should do to help?
I think we need to stop Russia from attacking Ukraine. I think that's the bottom line. And I would like to, of course, wish that. And then I think that we can start working with the local communities and local government on what is needed, and the plan is there already. So I think that's the wish, that the other powerful governments somehow really push and try hard in all their means they have to talk to Russia to stop the war.
From my perspective, it's two things. When answering this question in Berlin, I was talking and pleading for long-range missiles and towers. Here I will talk about the other part, which I think is essential for Ukraine's not just military resilience, but recovery, and that is air defense. Because what air defense does is it protects, obviously, the Ukrainian armed forces. It protects Ukraine's human capital, because it protects civilians, the civilian infrastructure, i.e. hospitals, schools, kindergarten. It protects the energy grid that we were talking about, and it protects businesses. And as we also talked about businesses and Ukraine's economy, it is in turn then aiding Ukraine's armed forces. So without being able to receive this heavy ammunition, armory, and air defense, I don't think Ukraine has a chance, unfortunately.
Much has been already said, so I would say, again, more ammunition and weapons and defense system first. Second, more sanctions against Russia. And third, also the homeworks here for us as to Russian influence in Europe and elsewhere, including our proposal to limit the Schengen for Russian diplomats or cutting remaining dependencies, looking into this and improving our security, plus also working on our defense spending and our military readiness.
Yes, definitely ammunition and air defense system for sure. Yes, I do agree. Sanctions, it's really extremely important because Russia is still strong. But you know, I would also add support Ukrainians, support Ukrainians' mental health, because we forgot that for these 3 years, those who are staying in Ukraine, they have, you know, they are absolutely mentally exhausted. So we do need this support for people who are staying in Ukraine and, you know, work for this victory and still, you know, they already need support as well.
Guys, thank you very much. It's been an excellent panel. Wonderful things that we've all learned. Thank you very much. Good luck, everyone. And please, everyone, a big round of applause for our lovely panelists. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I hope you enjoyed all the debates, all the chats, and also networking, informal networking during the coffee breaks today. It is now a pleasure for me to invite you for the very last point of today's program, and it is the reception, which will be served in the Winter Garden. It means the same place where the lunch was served. And let me also remind you that from 8:30 there is a debate and screening of the movie 20 Days in Mariupol in the cinema Kino Světozor. Wish you a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you back again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.